You are listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 34. I'm your host, Chris Webster, with my co-host, Chris Sims. On today's show, we bring back Michael Ashley to talk about his new company and revolutionary site recording and project management application, Codifi. Let's get to it. Welcome to the show, everyone. Chris, it's good to have you back. We haven't had you on an episode in a little while. You've been traveling a little bit.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're going to jump right into this because we have a lot to talk about this week. And we're bringing back Michael Ashley, who was on the last episode on kite aerial photography, which was fantastic. I actually shared that episode to a couple of new groups that I found on kite aerial photography on Facebook, including a gentleman that just he doesn't even do it for archaeology. He just does kite aerial photography professionally for whoever wants to do it.
Nice.
And getting a lot of good traction on that. So anyway, we're bringing back Michael to talk about something we have alluded to a number of times on a number of different podcasts, and that is Codifi. But before we get talking about Codifi, first, Michael, how's it going?
It's going well. I finally landed from the kite.
It's funny you say landed because this is your last day in the United States for a little while. So, you know.
That's true. Yeah, headed back to Italy to hang with family. You know, when it's really hot there.
Yeah.
Finally.
Excellent. And of course, anybody listening to this is a conversation taking place in the past because I think we're putting this out in like a week and a half. But anyway, so yeah, let's talk about this. Let's talk about before we get into Codifi. We kind of want to talk about the current situation and what's going on. Michael, what's your sense of where we're at and why? Why are we making Codifi? What's the point? Don't people already have tablets? Don't they already have things to record on? Don't they have Word, Michael? I mean, what do we need Codifi for when there's Word and fillable PDFs? Seriously.
And by Word, you mean WordStar, right?
Right. Word Perfect, actually. I don't know what you're talking about.
Perfect.
Don't they have an iPad app?
They should. They should.
So what's your current sense of the situation?
I guess I'd say what we've been doing, and we're not unique to trying to do this, but we are actually doing it, which is kind of, I think, special in its own right, is we're having lots and lots of conversations around the country and I'd say the world about kind of the state of are we in, are we out, where are we headed in terms of using digital technology specifically for recordation of sites. So one of the quick core findings is that everyone's using some form of technology, because we haven't found a single group other than the Habs Hair guys, and we'll put this in the show notes from the Library of Congress, who are shooting film. So everyone's at least shooting digital photos and using GPS units because they're generally required to do so for getting sub-meter, especially for CRM work. But I'd say our findings are pretty astounding in terms of the lack of real adoption. And I think one of the things we definitely need to talk about is there's really good reason for that. Mm-hmm. In terms of trying to come up with a method that will literally last, that will be more efficient, but also more generally reusable and preservable than the paper alternative. So on the what we are seeing is, as you said, we keep using this term, and maybe we got to start to get it out there so other people hear it because it seems to resonate well. And that is this notion of just taking what we did on paper or do on paper and putting it on a tablet, which is what we call the paper on glass phenomenon.
Right.
And that is rife with its own issues, for sure. I mean, you kind of feel good about it, say, hey, look, I'm doing digital archaeology, but are we? And then the other major thing we have to bring up is we're not just interested in recording in the field. We're interested in the complete life cycle of that data. I just came across something today where over 6,000 years of climate and cultural data have just been released. I mean, amazing things that can be done when you think about the products that we're generating as data, as knowledge, really, as opposed to just collecting attributes on paper. So that's not happening. That's so not happening. And when we're talking with the different agencies across the country, we will be lucky in the next couple of years if we get kind of new versions of fillable PDFs or other types of kind of direct correlations between what is being collected in the field and then kind of just depositing that into a database inside of a SHPO.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our job, our mission here, and why I'm so thrilled to be talking about it today is to really go beyond that, to dedicate ourselves to a completely different way of thinking about all this stuff. So,
right.
Nothing short of that, because then, why get up in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a major disconnect, and like before we can even really begin to effectively use data, we have to first acknowledge that there even is a disconnect, and that we need to, address like how we're using data and how we're thinking, like you had said, Michael, thinking about the entire life cycle of, how do we turn data into knowledge, and how do we, disseminate knowledge.
Yeah, and it's good you brought that up, Chris, because we just recorded the CRM Arc podcast, which is out now as you're listening to this show, episode 88, I think. And, I was bringing up this whole idea of the paper on glass thing and digital archaeology, and some of the comments brought up, and I know some people are thinking this, so I'll bring it up now, is that it was said that we've already done digital archaeology. We've already been doing digital archaeology, and they were saying that in reference to like, GIS and Trimbles, and people have done, Word documents on the Trimble before, and that's digital archaeology, and they've done, they've done different things. And he's like, well, we've been doing this for, variations of it for 20 years. And I'm thinking, for me to say we're doing something now, it means it's the industry standard. But right now, the industry standard straight up is paper. Okay. I mean, you might work for a company that's using a tablet for something. You'll definitely work for a company that's using a Trimble or some sort of GPS device, but well, yes, I'll concede that is digital archaeology, because you're not drawing on a paper map and you're not drawing on a quad map in the field. So yes, okay, sure, digital archaeology, but from a form and a site recording standpoint, not the GIS, but the actual, narrative data, that's just from an industry standard standpoint, that's simply not digital yet. Just because a small percentage of companies are using tablets, as an industry goes, we're not digital, and it's
right.
Just,
that's not a complete digital system either. That's like cherry picking certain components as digital, whereas the rest are just done, by hand on a different format.
Right. So some of the reasons, one of the big reasons we want to do, we're developing Codifi is not just because tablets exist, not just because technology, but because it's the right thing to do, and for a number of reasons, for the archival reasons. One of the things we were talking about in the pre-show is the Library of Congress 500-year plan. So, Michael, why don't you tell us what that's about and how Codifi can get closer to achieving their goals?
Yeah, well, so I'm happy I can finally talk about this, but we've been working with the National Park Service to kind of take a look at the uses of 3D data recording. So photogrammetry and laser scanning data to kind of do the daily jobs of maintaining the Park Service. And it was a 2-year survey, and we just completed it. And one of the most striking things for me personally, as someone who grew up with film and who loves film, I love film. I love the fact that film actually persists. And when I mean film, I don't mean, the latest Independence Day movie. I mean like Kodachrome and Ektachrome and film, and then the production of archival prints from that, silver halide and all that kind of good stuff. So it is actually the law of the land that if you work on a federal project and you're doing particular kinds of documentation, specifically architectural type of preservation stuff, that you will submit film. You will submit 4x5, ideally, film and drawings. That's the HabSARE program and HabSARE HAL's program. And I got to say, talking to those guys, they're absolutely right, because you can submit the stuff to the Library of Congress for free. They will archive it. It will persist. And that is a promise that all of us will continue to fail to be able to actually be committed to, because digital is hard. I mean, I love digital technology. I absolutely love it. I will personally never go back to shooting film as a primary way or method because of all of the advantages that we get with digital. We actually, as I've now said, in 2016, I feel like we finally crossed the line and with a little bit of effort, go back to listen to photogrammetry podcasts, you can produce a better product than film. We can do that now, but it requires a dedication. It requires new training. It requires actually learning more skills on top of all the other things you have to learn to do good archaeology. So this 500-year thing is interesting because at the same time, across the service, what we're hearing is a general kind of lack of commitment to digital preservation for all the reasons I just described. The other thing that we have to bring up almost immediately every single time is just app burnout, right? Mm-hmm. Like what I feel like our major mission right now is to help people think beyond the moment and think 2-3 years down the future. Which is true of everything. Like, if you're struggling to pay your bills, you're not thinking about vacation, right? If you're sitting there going, well, I got to figure out how to just kind of go along as a small CRM firm and survive, and we understand all of the moving parts of our business, it's going to be very difficult for you to just go, all right, well, I'm now going to spend $3,000 to $30,000 on a bunch of iPads and go digital. For what? No one's asking me to do this. So, our looking at the barriers to entry is actually the really fun part, because I think that we're also starting to come up with a sweet spot for how to do it. And the best part is that the success of the actual projects, which I know we'll talk about in the second segment, is just beyond overwhelming. I mean, we could all talk about this all the time, but when it comes down to it, is the proof is in the doing. And now that we've seen the doing on over a dozen projects, it's like, there's just no going back, right? Mm-hmm. You can't unsee it. You can't undo it. So that's the exciting part to talk about for sure.
Yeah.
Right. So before we get into that second segment, one of the things I wanted to really mention, because Codifi is not something, and we'll actually say what Codifi is here shortly, but Codifi is not something that's being developed just like out of the box overnight, kind of out of the brains right now. Michael's been working on this for years now in various formats, and I want you to talk about where Codifi is being used right now, because right now Codifi, the various forms of Codifi that have been created for different projects, we're planning on taking those elements that we like out of Codifi and bringing them into something that everybody can use, initially specifically for CRM here in the United States, but really any archaeological project, and taking the best parts of those things and the lessons learned from those and creating something amazing. So first, how long has Codifi been in the field, so to speak, in its various forms, and where is it currently being used?
Okay, so I'll be a slight deviation, because I think you also said, like, how long have we been kind of thinking about doing this? And I just spent the 4th of July with Ruth Tringham, mm-hmm. Retired faculty from Cal, and it turns out I have a photo of us sitting under a bug tent in Bulgaria in 1995. 1995. It's my first archaeological project, and we actually, like, if I go back to those notes.
Yeah,
we were coming up with, like, the thing was like this daybook concept of the digital journal, the digital notebook that you would have, and all the things that connect to it, including we actually did digital photography, as in we shot film and then had the film digitized, and we're making video interviews with people and all that. So we've been thinking about this for literally 21 years. It's insane.
Wow.
And the issues that we were dealing with then, I mentioned this in a previous podcast, are still with us today. So the barriers are very real. So that said, our approach has been to do two things. To really kind of think through and talk with and work with people all over the world on what, on the one hand, like, if you could really dream about the future, what would that be? But what are the day-to-day issues that you're just dealing with? And that can be everything from, trying to be competitive and writing proposals if you're a CRM firm, to having to submit all of your data to, the Institute of Archaeology, or whatever it might be. It's everything in between. So that's one thing. But then starting in 2013, we started doing what we would call really, truly kind of Codifi projects. And that's projects that would like take a bit of a risk and put digital, a completely paperless system in the field in real time. And, I would be amiss if I didn't start off by talking with Jezreel Valley Regional Project in Israel. In about 1 minute or less, I can say that the ambitions of that project with Matt Adams at the helm is to come up with a very deep, if he could do it, it'd be a 100% coverage survey of the entire valley. So the quick findings there are we put this paperless app into people's hands, and they promised that they would do everything on paper in 2013, and they abandoned paper 24 hours later and never looked back. It was absolutely terrifying for me personally because I wasn't there, but it worked out. From then, this year, to wind forward to 2016, they just completed a survey using our survey tool, which was just mind-altering what they were able to record. Mm-hmm. In 3 weeks, they did about just shy of 8 kilometers of a highly intensive survey. We'll put the image in the show notes of what they were able to accomplish. It was really cool. It was also an integration with ArcGIS in real time. So we had, we were able to really kind of put our put our money where our mouth is, as it were. We've done projects in throughout Europe, but also here in the United States. The Denver Museum of Nature and Science is working on a really amazing survey right now in New Mexico. And currently, just today, right now, which is why I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning, the Bonnie Clark from the University of Denver is working with her team at the Amache Japanese relocation camp in near Grenada in Colorado. And they've been using what we are definitely calling Codifi for the last couple of weeks, and it's just completely transformed the way they're doing things. And that's great because they're all field school students and archaeologists, and they know what they're doing. But today they have returning folks who are actually, let's just call them residents against their will, from Amache, and they are now using Codifi. And what I'm hearing from people is that it's going great. I mean, they're able to go out and do survey, take photos, and do real kind of archaeology, along with giving physical accounting of their time and testimony of their time at the camp. So this is the other real reason we do what we do, because it's all about people, and it's about really trying to make a difference, and that is so exciting to me. So
awesome. Well, we're going to take a break soon, but when we get back, I think we're going to really dive into Codifi. Chris, do you got any questions on what we talked about so far?
No questions right now, but we've got a lot of ground to cover in the second segment, so I'm excited.
Yeah, we might actually reveal a little bit about what Codifi is and when and how you can get it.
there's a thought. I think it's time.
I think it's time. All right. So when we get back from the break, check that out. And I'm going to say this on the anticipation that we've done this in the next week and a half, but go check out the website, codifi.com, because people are going to look it up anyway. So we better have that thing up by now. Go check that out, and we'll get back from the break and tell you exactly what it is. Back in a second. Kim Biddulph explores the books set in our prehistoric past on Prehistories, an innovative and creative show. Kim investigates the archaeology and anthropology behind your favorite stories by bringing on guests that are experts in the field and that can speak to the actual story behind the story. Check out the show at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/prehistories. Now let's get back to the show. All right, we're back, and before we started the break, we mentioned we're going to talk about Codifi, but to talk about Codifi, we need to talk about a little bit of what Codifi is and what our thinking is for Codifi. Because like we said in the first segment, a lot of people are just doing what we're calling paper on glass, and we don't want to do that. Now, there has to be, just because of the way things work, there is going to obviously be fields to fill in and things like that, but we're trying to think of it in a different way. We're using a minimum $500 piece of technology here with some amazing capabilities, and they get better every year. And we want to use those. We want to use those not because they're there, but we want to use those because it enhances the user experience. And kind of the whole point of using a tablet is not just digital archaeology, not just getting rid of paper, but that is a huge part of it, is getting rid of paper, because that's just a nasty thing on the planet anyway. But also to bring us back into archaeology, to bring us back into being archaeologists and not just paper pushers and dealing with all this paper, because the paper aspect of archaeology is really it's really a real huge time-consuming sort of thing, from dealing with the paper, from, oh, did we print off enough site forms before the project? Oh, crap, I'm out. I mean, how many times I've been on a project where we ran out of, the inventory form for tin cans and had to run back to the truck, or just write everything in a write in the raid notebook and then transcribe it later, which is a huge pain in the neck. So, there's lots of reasons to get rid of paper, but like I said, one of the big ones is just sort of rethinking site recording, unchaining us from the site form, like I said in the first segment, and rethinking the user experience for how we do this. So, Michael, how are we starting to think about that? What are some of the things we're doing, to start thinking about unchaining ourselves from the form and rethinking the user experience from a field standpoint?
Right. So I'm going to try to talk about this from kind of two perspectives. One is this, as I like to call it, the intimate scalability issues, user experience and workflow. And then I know it's going to shock anyone who knows me, but we're going to try to get really practical and talk about, because it turns out that it's the practicalities that are the weirdly really most exciting things to me. So I'm going to kind of start there. When we do this thing called the data audition, that's AU audition, but it has morphed into data therapy sessions, where we basically sit down with people and we talk to them and we find out, where all of their pain is. And I've done hundreds of these now. So let's just kind of look at the archaeology in New Mexico. And they have the LA form, the LA or lab form, which is 9 to 12 pages as a docx or PDF. And the cool thing is that if you actually filled out all of the things that they're requiring you to do in that form, you will have done a phenomenal job of recording the archaeology. But the challenge is that because it's paper, because it's a kind of two-dimensional, one-person, single-user operable thing, it just radically limits what you can do. And so for anyone who's in CRM has heard of the notion of the continuation sheet. Mm-hmm. So even there, where the form actually performs pretty well, when you find a multi-context site, a multi-component site that has multiple cultures, when you hit the limit of 3, then you stop using the form and you use a continuation sheet. This is just an example. But what they need, what the Denver Museum of Nature and Science needs, it's simple. Hey, we need to do stuff digitally, and then we need to be able to produce a PDF. That's the need. If we don't solve that practical need, if we get on and talk about holodecks and touch IDs and haptic technologies and VR, no one cares, and they shouldn't care, because they have a practical thing to do. So what we did is we spent a lot of energy to build a thing that generates multiple types of output in real time right on your iPad. And that's what they're using right now. So they can go out and they do recording. And that's the other thing, is the recording that they do I'm now circling into this scalability and workflow intimacy thing. So what we don't want them doing is focusing on recording on a form. Chris, you've talked about this a million times. If you're an archaeologist in the field, you are engaging with the world. You're trying to do your very best job to think about all the things you have to think, like you're in the back of your head. You have to think about all the stuff that you're supposed to be doing. Okay, I need to document this stuff. If I'm a crew chief, I got to make sure I get the stuff done by the time we get out. Oh my God, are they wearing DEET? Are a sunscreen? Are they hydrating? A billion things going off in your head. And so what Codifi is about is trying to quiet your mind. It's a very Zen thing. It's like, can we start to provide? That's what digital can actually do for us. is can we start to give you a set of tools that drives you towards not having to think all the time about all the little things that you're going to forget, so that you can focus on recording. And that's exactly what happened with the DMNS project, is that they can just go out and they can just record. And they can hand this to field school students and get them rolling and doing recording in just a couple of minutes. Amache. With Amache, they're going out and trying. They have the affordance of the site's not going anywhere, so it doesn't have the same time pressure as a CRM project. However, they have stakeholders who are dying, as in the folks that were at Amache who are not going to be here in years, and they want to record as much and share as much as they possibly can in real time. So they try to record everything in the sense that they go out and they have these tallies, and they'll record the colorless glass and the milk glass and the maker's mark glass and the bottles and cans and other things that they find in toys and all this stuff. But they have no time to actually do anything with that stuff because it's just so much data. And so what we figured out is a way for them to be able to actually tally all of that, everything in real time, and actually record all of it. If they decide to do it, and it is a choice, they can actually do, for the first time that we know of, they can do 100% site recovery. It's all geolocated, it's cross-referenced, it's bound to the actual physical location. It's tied to the team, so we get the sense of who's actually doing the recording, which is also very cool. And all of it is archival because it's tied to international data standards. So that the data can be pushed out in a variety of forms, of which Excel, if you need it, is just one of them. And so that's pretty exciting. And that's kind of what we mean by Codify. It's really about it's as much about workflow as it is about technology. But I think one of the things that we just need to finally start saying is actually also about technology, because we are actually using, we are building software. We are doing that. And so I think it's going to be important for us to actually kind of talk about our process for how we're doing that too.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because one of the things we're talking about is how, again, when you start not thinking about the form, when you start thinking, okay, I just want to record an archaeological site, you start realizing that it doesn't matter where you are in the country, whether you're at a Japanese relocation camp in Colorado, or you're at a can scatter in Nevada, or you're doing shovel tests in South Carolina. I mean, it really doesn't matter. You're recording similar data all the time. Now, shovel testing obviously records slightly different data, but still archaeological site data, and when you write those descriptions, when you write those feature descriptions, when you write those artifact descriptions, it doesn't matter where you're at. You could be in Israel. You could be in Australia. You could be in, a bug tent in Bulgaria. It doesn't matter where you're at. You're going to record the same data. So, Michael came up with a brilliant analogy, and we're calling, Codify as kind of the TurboTax for archaeology, where we're prompting you for data. We're prompting you for information on the user interface, not in a form way, but in a graphical way. We're prompting you for the information. And then whatever you need is a form. In fact, as a field person, you should never even see the form, right? The form is the last thing produced after error checking is done and maybe some references are added and things like that. Then the very last small, minuscule thing that's kind of an afterthought is, oh, here's your form, so you can send it off to the agency that you're working for. The more important thing is we can give you the data in any way that you need to do your analysis, for the report and data visualization tools and things like that. So that's one of the ways. We're calling it the murder map of the United States, with all the strings and stuff. You tie site descriptions across different states. It actually works. We're doing that. And you start looking at the different forms, and they're all the same. The words are different. What they call things are different, but the data's the same. So Chris, you've worked all over the place.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm so excited to hear about Codify because, it works because wherever we are on this planet, we're studying, human cultures and material remains and stuff. And so, we have certain components that we all agree on as standards across the board. We've got different research questions, sure, different cultural variables, sure, but they're, like you guys had said, there's so many components that are the same, and they're interchangeable. you know, in a form, in like a digital format, stuff like that. And it's amazing to see this happening because you've got people of different skill levels and different levels of involvement within a project. And like we had touched on at the beginning of this episode, not having to worry about structuring a paper form or just building a form in, tap forms or Excel or whatever you're using lets you get to actually performing the science and actually like thinking about the finished product. And so like, I can't tell you how many times I've been in the field and I'm just so exhausted, just like mentally fried from filling out mindless paperwork all day. And it's like at the end of the day, like I'll have, maybe one of my field techs will ask me, a fairly intelligent question about, like the goals of the research questions and stuff that we're studying. And it takes so much energy to get my head back in the game on that level. And I'm like, what the hell am I even doing this for? I'm just kind of like an automaton that's just filling out all this mindless paperwork. So, to get back to the point that, like we can finally be scientists again.
Yeah, totally. And that's like when we were working together back in China Lake last fall, Chris, and it's 120 degrees out and you're just like, I don't care about this historic site anymore. I've been on it for 3 days, and there's snakes and bombs.
Yeah, it's just a can. Yeah,
right. And you're trying to deal with tap forms, what we were using out there, and you're like, God damn it, one more field to fill out. So yeah, I understand. Right. But let's get into some of the points about Codify because this is, like we said, this is a new thing that we're trying to do here, and it's a new way of thinking about the site. So Michael, what are some of the features that are available now that you're developing, like literally as we speak, and are being used in the field?
All right, cool. So it's always a fun thing because you have to talk about things from the technology of where we are now, but we also have to really our jobs, as I keep saying, are just to try to envision where things will be very soon, like driverless car technology and all sorts of things.
Right.
So I'll just give you some simple scenarios of what we're trying to solve. And Chris, you've challenged me in the past, kind of this build out the worst case scenario for digital technology. Mm-hmm. So the worst case scenario would be something like working on at Channel Lake, where you definitely won't have internet. For some reason, you will have GPS technology. Somehow that always is okay, right?
Yeah.
Because, by the way, also a radio, but you can't have radios, and you can't have, we can go on and on.
Yeah, unless the Navy's jamming your GPS at the time, but that doesn't happen too often.
that just happened a couple weeks ago. But right. The point is that we have to be able to kind of really listen and play towards these very difficult scenarios. So the big ones, the monster ones that are very difficult to solve digitally, synchronization. That is, I have two people working on the same thing in the same place at the same time. If we have paper, it's simple. I have my notebook, you have your notebook, right? Mm-hmm. And if I want to write something, I go, hey, yo, Chris, can you give me your DPR 523? And I can go and start writing on that form. Very comforting. Okay. If I'm doing a tally, it's a very simple thing. If I have 16 people doing it at the same time, the benefits of parallel versus serial are so clear. But to be able to bring all that together without internet, without any form of radio communication is incredibly difficult. And we've actually solved it. So that's cool. Personal favorite as a photographer, the photo log.
Yeah.
I should just let the silence just sit there for everyone. The photo log sucks. It is. First of all, the concept of a photo log is insane, and it was even more insane when it was film because when you wind your film and it says, "Oh, it's picture 1A" as opposed to 1. It's like, oh my God. And most of the forums that we see across the country still talk about roll number and frame number. Yeah. And people record things like photo dot or DSCN 005. Mm-hmm. Now here's a concept. I'm taking photographs of this feature. Feature's number is 6. It's in site 27A because that's what you decided to name it. So Codify knows where you are. It knows what it is. It knows what you're recording. It knows what type of photo you're taking. That's the only piece of information you need to add. And then you get a caption to read something like overview of feature 6 in site such and such, recorded at this time with this geolocation. That seems simple, but that's exactly what we're trying to describe is making those processes. Oh, and it actually renames your files for you. Mm-hmm. So, it's solving those types of things, helping people. Barcodes is a big thing right now, trying to figure out how I'm in the field and I'm recording a survey. This is what we just did in Israel, so that each person can have a bunch of bags and these are amazing tags that are from the nursery or agricultural industry. So they're indelible, they'll last forever. They won't be eaten by grasshoppers, which is another problem we could talk about with the mache. And so they can just simply go, okay, this is an object that I physically do want to record. And I have a nice twist at the end of this sentence. So I'm going to record this object. I'm going to collect this object. So I scan the barcode in real time, and it ties everything. That barcode can be in the photographs, and Codifi can read the barcode from the photograph. So you don't have to sit there and write out a whole large site board of stuff. That is like thousands of hours of time saved on that project, and just better chain of custody. Mm-hmm. Virtual recording, that's another thing. Like the concept that they loved was the idea is like, wait a minute. All right, so last year, true story, they actually physically collected a bunch of old shoes. These shoes were not historic. They were like, I don't know, 3-year-old Air Jordans or something. And but they physically collected them because they were trying to be diligent about their site recording. Now they can just go in and take a photo to a standard that has been set by the team. So the team has decided what their standards of practice will be for recording, and then Codifi accommodates that. So these are the kind of basic kinds of things that we're trying to do. Archival imaging. It is very depressing to me to talk with shippos and to find out that basically shape files are submitted, PDFs are submitted, images are in the PDFs, but all that archival photography that was done, not so much submitted, generally speaking, like ever. And that is so beyond depressing. And that also, again, goes back to the Park Service, because images are huge and we don't know how to deal with them. And I don't even know what a camera raw file is or why I should care about it until you need to, because you actually need to submit a TIFF file. So that is got to be the biggest thing that we are trying to accomplish, because that's kind of that's our wheelhouse, is to also remind us that we're really talking about image and document management here. And that notion of born archival in your backpack, so that you're out there, you can record, that you feel secure about your data. You can actually get information back. I'm watching the clock. I know we have like 30 seconds. But here's a nice twist to think about as we move on and through this segment is, what would happen if you actually had all of your data in real time? Mm-hmm. And now that we do, we are seeing that is the tectonic shift of coolness. Is like, you don't need to wait 6 years for your academic research paper, and you don't need to wait 7 months for your CRM report to be done by the back office, because you can actually have it in real time, and you will. And we didn't, we only challenged people, but we wanted to see if they would do it. And it turns out there is just like a rabid addiction now to, oh my God, I can get this information in real time and make better decisions about how and what I'm recording in real time. And it's always 100% of the time has led to more recording, more recording and better recording.
Yes.
And then you can throw away the data later if you don't want to keep it. I don't care, but you are the last witness. That is our thing in archaeology. You are the last witness so many times to this archaeology, and the last human that will be able, or team that will be able to say anything about it before it's steamrolled, freight trained, high-speed railed, developed, or washed away, or blown up, or whatever it might be. And I feel like this is our biggest challenge, is to try to make it so that people can be better archaeologists literally in the field when they're recording.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to take a break real quick, and we're going to steal about 5 minutes from the App of the Day segment to really finish this up and tell you when Codifi is going to be available, give or take, and some pricing on it. So back in a second.
Because we are the App of the Day.
We are the App of the Day. That's true. That's a good point. All right, we're going to be back right in a second.
Jenny McNiven, host and diva of the Struggling Archaeologist's Guide to Getting Dirty, brings a witty, personal, and often musical view of archaeology. From personal experiences to just telling you about something she really loves, you'll always be informed and entertained. Listen to the Struggling Archaeologist's Guide to Getting Dirty on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, and at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/struggleart. Let's get back to the show.
All right, we're back. And like I said, we're going to take a few minutes here just to finish up our Codifi discussion, although it's never truly finished, is it? So one of the things I want to be sure that we mention is something that I'm really excited about, and it's kind of a buzzword these days with different things, but it's gamification. And the concept of gamification is really just kind of like seeing your statistics and seeing what you have to do and somewhat getting rewarded for completion and things like that. Now, we don't want to, we don't want to cheapen archaeology and say, oh, you did 25 shovel tests, you get a gold star kind of thing. But the idea behind it is the ability to, like out here in the West, there's ways to do this with shovel testing too, but out here in the West, we'll typically survey a site, close interval survey a site before we record it with everybody, so we know roughly what's on there. There's always something found that you didn't find on your close interval survey, so you have to add to it. But when we walk over a site and we find, 5 features and 6 diagnostic artifacts and some lithic scatters or whatever, we'll basically, in the days of paper, we'd actually hand those paper forms out to people, or they already have them, and then they give them back to you at the end of the thing. Well, digitally, we did the same thing at China Lake, except we didn't actually hand out forms. You just, on your tablet, you recorded the features that were assigned to you. If you were doing all the features, okay. If you're doing features 1 through 5 or 6 through 10 or something like that. And then you hand out the diagnostic artifacts, and then somebody's doing the overall site tally, and somebody's doing the site description. Well, those are all little units, right? So you can take your crew and you can just hand these tasks out to different people and say, okay, you're doing those. So then when you look at your own personal dashboard, for lack of a better term, you can see your statistics. You can see, okay, what have I done? What do I have left? You have a little meter going up, and then it turns green or something when you're done. That all has to be worked out. But that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, is not seeing the forms you have left to fill out, but seeing like exactly what you have left to do in a graphical way that's fun and interesting. And I'd really like to see something later on where I can go back and look at my stats for the whole project. It's really kind of a satisfying thing to say, oh, I recorded this many sites, I recorded this many artifacts or this many features, I was involved in this many things. And it's really kind of a thing to see that sense of accomplishment. So
can I riff on that for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So Chris doesn't know what we just worked on, like literally in the last 24 hours, but the Amache crew, for whatever reason, is highly enamored with The Hobbit, and they decided to name all their iPads after the different dwarves of The Hobbit.
Yes.
So I have screenshots I'm going to share with you guys. What we came up with is literally exactly that concept. So here's what they do. The crew chief, they go out and they do their survey and they record stuff and they flag and they do all that. And then they're going to come back and they're going to revisit artifacts based on a set of criteria. And one of those will be kind of back to flag and run. They're going to go in, they're going to do field analysis. They do collect some things, and they do something that Kent Lightfoot, archaeologist at Cal, coined as this notion of catch and release, where they're going to bring it back to the field house. They're going to do a bunch of additional stuff and proper photography and whatnot. And then they have to find that exact artifact. And two quick things. One, they were using flags, and the grasshopper infestation this year, because they had rain, ate all the flags every day to nothing. So, they had to have these things geolocated. But every device, what they would do is they go, all right, the crew chief would go, I'm going to assign to Dory or Nori or Smaug, I'm going to assign, or Bilbo, these, exactly what Chris just described. I'm going to assign these artifacts to that person. They could go out, they did all the analysis, and they took the photos, and they do all those things. And then when the person is done, they would check those items back in. At the end of the day, we synchronize all of the items that they've worked on that were checked in are then put onto the crew chief's iPad, who can do the final quality assurance and check. And if an item still needs to be worked on, she can just leave it checked out or check it back out to the person. It's been amazing. It's totally working. It's really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this leads to another point, though. So the gamification concept of being able to trust people to do a good job also is driven by the back end taxonomy system that we built in. That's helping them or guiding them towards making better decisions about how they're and what they're recording. So they're not just writing glass shard or glass shard, or you get the picture, but they're actually following a workflow. They know what the minimally viable recording is because their actual screen will go green once they've actually done all the things they need to do, which is recorded the GPS point, record the basic attributes, written a description, taken measurements, taken photos. All of those things Codifi is instructing them or helping them to do. And it also tries to stay out of their way. So some of these kids, there's a couple of high school kids out there, they're just shredding it. They're just kicking ass. They're out there just recording tons and tons of stuff and doing a really great job. And some people need more help. And it is all happening in real time. They have, 15, 20 people out there doing this. It's been very cool.
Awesome. Well, we'll probably have some more Codifi podcasts later, and I'm seriously trying to think about how we could do just like a Codifi branded podcast, like just all Codifi, where we can talk about different things and new features and usage type stuff. So look for that in the next 6 months or so when Codifi starts to come out. So it'll be your sort of how websites, companies have blogs and things like that about their stuff. Well, we do podcasts, so
yeah.
we'll do podcasts.
Well, we're totally going to do that because also Center for Digital Archaeology. I mean, it is all about the knowledge sharing, and it isn't about the profit stuff. So we'll talk about that, I guess, now, right?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about pricing and availability. So what are we looking at for first? When can people get Codifi into their hands? And not only when, but what are they going to get? Because that's another sort of revolutionary way of thinking here is what are you going to get when you say, I want Codifi? What's in the box, to quote Brad Pitt?
So we're going to do it. We're going to say what it is now and what it's been. So what it has been is us doing a bunch of custom work to really help people go digital and try to eliminate everything that's a barrier. So we kind of talk about three components to Codifi. So what you're going to get is Codifi is a product. It's not just an idea, right? So we've kind of effectively solved, if you will, the murder map of archaeology in the Middle East. And so lots of folks, I have a call just tomorrow. Again, Codifi has been tuned for the way that archaeology is done throughout Israel, Jordan, and the Levant. So they can just get it and start using it. And for that, they pay a very modest subscription price on a per device basis. But that leads to the second point, which is we are absolutely dedicated to helping. So we're full service forever. And if you need us, we'll be available. We tend to go and actually physically work on almost every project for a while. Obviously, we have some issues with scale for that. But I got to say that's a really important thing is to continue to point out that, we formed Codifi Incorporated as a limited California benefit corporation. But that means that we have a social justice mission. And that is, again, we are trying to make archaeology better. Or that's always in the background. So Codifi CRM will ship as Codifi running on tablets. And you will get from us, if you want, which 99% of the people we've talked to do want. There's sometimes you have some security concerns about tablet issuance from very large companies we're finding. But generally speaking, if you're a CRM firm and you want Codifi, you'll get a box from us, a Pelican case with tablets loaded, software supported, and basically all the barriers to entry eliminated. We're entertaining a subscription kind of price for doing that. And our intent is to make that. So far, no one said anything but when can we get it? So clearly our pricing is too low, but that's okay. So that's the what of the now. Our intent is, if things go well and we get this a bit of funding, our intent is to work state by state across the country and have a kind of TurboTax model, as we talked about, for compliance archaeology within the United States by the end of 2017. By the end of 2016, we will already have it for like 20 states, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where it is at. Where it's headed is more and more modules. And so I guess, for all of you people out there who are thinking open access, open source, what I've been doing for like the last forever years with Mookadoo and all that. And we really understand that domain. My personal pledge to the universe is that if you're a student, if you're out there doing archaeology, if you're a shovel bum, Codifi should be available to you at no cost. And the bigger, grander mission, which we can't talk about now, but because we're out of time, not because I don't want to, is our ultimate dedication to digital preservation and all that is the other kind of core mission of Codifi that gets people very excited, and that's also there. So we don't ever want price to be a barrier. And if you're interested in helping in any way, you want to provide feedback, ideas, you think we're full of crap, I don't care. Please get in touch, because we're all doing this together, and I really sincerely mean that. So let's do it. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
All right, so I just want to mention one more thing before we close this up and move to our App of the Day segment. Our long-term vision for Codifi is more of a full project management tool from beginning to end, resource management, not just archaeological site recording. We want you to be able to do everything within the application, from mileage and time tracking to report writing and mobilization, demobilization, resource tracking. Like I said, you check out your vehicles in the tablets to your project, within Codifi, stuff like that. So that's the end goal for this, not just a site recording application. And that's where a lot of applications end, actually, is just in site recording. But we want this to be, a tool that you can use for everything that you do, and it all integrates seamlessly. So, all right. Well, that being said, go ahead and check out the website. We got a bunch of links in the show notes. And I'm going to include Michael's email in the show notes as well. And you can also email us here at the Podcast Network. So if you have any questions, but more to come on that later. All right, so we're going to slam out our App of the Day segment real quick, even though, as Michael said during the break, actually, the whole episode was kind of App of the Day, and that's Codifi, which I didn't even think about.
Yeah.
I'm gonna mention mine real quick, because I'm literally going to do this in like 30 or 45 seconds, because there really isn't a whole lot to talk about it. But it's an app called Hotel Tonight. I think you can actually use it online. Don't quote me about that. But it's an app that works on iOS and Android, and it's intended for last-minute hotel arrangements. Now, I've tested this out on some of the really small towns in Nevada, and of course, they don't have these little, these small one-off hotels in a lot of these places. They do in some towns, but it's really for, I just got to this town that's a relatively medium-sized town. I need a room tonight, because I didn't know how far I was going to make it as I was driving to my next projects, and I don't feel like sleeping in the car. So you pull out Hotel Tonight, and it shows you the last-minute deals. Because hotels, if they have rooms available and they're affiliated with these resources, I mean, they'll discount the hell out of their rooms just to fill it for the night, right? So, and that's what this app searches. So hoteltonight.com, download the application. It's free. I just looked at it today again. They actually have a promotion where if you have an iPhone and you use Apple Pay to buy it, there's like $100 discount on some hotels. So it's not available if your hotel's like $60. You can't use it, but they're not going to give you $40 or give it to you for free. But if your hotel's like $150, you can get $100 off, and then it'll cost you $50. So it's really good for field techs, and if you're traveling across the country and you're like, damn it, I just need to sleep somewhere tonight that's comfortable because I'm starting my field work the next day and I'm going to drive all morning and blah, 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 blah. So check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saving yourself on that kind of fatigue, it really goes a long way for like long drives and, a long time on the road, stuff like that.
Right.
So I'll definitely be checking that out. I'm going to be spending a lot of time on the road in the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really good for road trips, because sometimes you have a plan for how far you're going to make it that day. But I've done this before where I'm like, okay, well, I think we're going to make it to this town, and then, so we booked the hotel because we don't want it to go away. And then it turns out we didn't make it nearly as far as we thought we were, or we made it way farther than we thought we would. And it's like, crap, I don't want to stop in this town. I want to keep going, but shit, I just booked the hotel. So
Yeah.
I want to be able to get to a town, pull up this application and say what's available right now on a good price. So
Nice.
okay, so when you get to that town, you're probably going to want to eat. So that'll move us to the next app. Chris, what do you got?
Yeah, so I'm going to review Food Gawker. It's available on, get this, the iOS and the Android store. So
Whoa.
this is the first time I've ever done an app that's available on the Android store. Yeah, so it's kind of like a searchable recipe thing that looks a lot like Pinterest. I use Pinterest too for recipes, just because I like to be able to enter in search terms and look at pictures and be like, oh yeah, I totally want to eat that. So like you can go onto Food Gawker and you can go into search and just enter in like anything really you want. So like if you have like 2 ingredients, say like watermelon and onion, you can go ahead and type in watermelon onion, and then it'll turn up like all these really cool things that you can make with watermelon and onion. And I actually did that this past weekend, and it turned out to be like really awesome. Made just like watermelon slices with onion and balsamic glaze and like feta cheese on it. And it was a stupid combination of foods that turned out to be really delicious. So if you have like stuff in your fridge, or, you know, to bring it back to the scenario that Chris Webster just laid out, if you have like some stuff in your cooler in your car, or, you know, you show up in an exit ramp town and you're like, oh, well, this produce selection is garbage, but at least I can look at the 2 fresh ingredients they have here and maybe cobble something together. So it's really helpful. I've talked a lot about food on past episodes of Archaeotech, and also numerous mentions in the CRM Archaeology podcast. I'm kind of food obsessed, but yeah, it just helps you survive on the road.
Nice. Awesome. Well, check that out. We've got the link to their website in the show notes, and that from that link you can find the link to the apps. So, but this is another website where you can actually use it on the web as well, not just in the application. So, Hotel Tonight, it actually looks like it might just be a application only, and the website is a landing platform for the application. So, anyway, so our final app of the day in the last 3 minutes here is something Michael uses a lot, and it's something he's got me using a lot too, and I really like it. It was a little, honestly, for me, it was a little bit, I had to really think about how I was going to use this, and then once I figured it out, like mentally, once that switch flipped, it was like, okay, this totally makes sense, and I can see lots of different applications other than what we're just using it for. So, Michael, tell us about Trello.
Yeah, so we've been using various kind of apps. There's like a whole tool fatigue going on right now, and as I call it, like the programmer hipster development space. But a term I had not heard until yesterday at this party.
Nice.
So Trello is a visual way of organizing ideas and projects. That's not the innovative part. What's innovative is just all the amazing ways that that this card concept, what's called in Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, which is the notion of always trying to do better, which is another practice that we try to do both in Coda and Codify. Mm-hmm. It's the idea of what they call a Kanban system, K-A-N, Kanban system. And that is that you can put these cards in these different columns on the screen. And this works on, by the way, so I think I've one-upped you guys because it works on Mac, Windows, the web, iOS, and Android. Works on kind of everything.
Well, and it also links to the Apple Watch, I found out, and has Slack integration. I mean, this thing is everywhere.
Yeah, it is. I didn't want to like it for a long time, but I gotta say it is. What I love about it, first of all, as I mentioned, is visual. So if I'm trying, if we're just using it for the purpose of storyboarding or having concepts of like, all right, so one of the things we're trying to do is coming up with a different persona of like, you're the Joe average shovel bum, or awesome Mary, who's like the world's greatest crew chief or whatever. It's great for that, but it's also just fantastic for getting things done. So I mean, what will happen is people will like go out in the field and use Codify, and they'll come back literally with a list of 5,000 things that they want us to change. And I just chuck that all into Trello, and we can just bust them out. We can assign it to different people. As you mentioned, there's 10,000 different integrations. It's also just a lot of fun. It's that, people use it. It's kind of, it's going to remind you, if you're into that stuff, back to Food Gawker to make it all kind of full circle here. It's going to remind you a lot of Pinterest.
Yeah.
Because it's basically kind of, I use it like Pinterest. I mean, I visually, as Chris will know, I'm obsessive about this, but I'll have a visual icon for basically everything on the screen.
Yes.
And it's just awesome. So check it out. It's fun.
And Michael is a power Pinterest user too, by the way. So,
Yeah, I think I've used it 3 times. I kept pronouncing it Pinterest? I don't know, whatever. I can't even pronounce it. Weirdly, I'm obsessive about doilies. That's not true, actually, at all.
That's actually true. So, all right. So, real quick, Trello is free, which is crazy. The only thing, you get unlimited boards, they call it, lists, cards, members, checklist attachments, all that kind of stuff. Basic integrations with Box, Drive, and Dropbox, and file attachments up to 10 megabytes. So when you pay for the business class, they call it, which is $9.99 per user per month when paid annually, you get upgrades on all that stuff, and you can do different things. But I'm thinking like 99% of the people listening to this can just go for the free one, and it will work out great for you. So, so that's it for today's episode. Check out all the links in the show notes. And I just want to make one more push here, because somebody reminded me of this, and I keep forgetting to change our outros. But Archaeotech and a number of the APM podcasts are now available on Google Play Podcasts. They let us sign our podcasts up for that before they launched, so I kind of forgot about it when they launched, because I don't have an Android phone and I didn't get the notification that podcasts are ready. So I keep forgetting that they're actually over there. So I know by looking at our stats, over half of our listeners actually use an Android device. So for various podcasts. So check them out. I know. It's actually kind of terrible for us, right? So actually, go check those out on Google Play Podcast. If you've been listening to on our website, you don't need to anymore. You can just download them right in Google Play. So check that out if you got an Android phone. You can actually listen to those on the web from Google Play. If you're not an iTunes fan or you don't want to listen to it on our website, you don't need an Android phone. You can just listen to it straight on the web on Google Play. So the link to that is in the show notes. And like I said, that's it for this episode. Thanks, Michael and Chris, for coming on today, and we'll be back next time. We've got a fun interview that we're trying to schedule this week about some amazing petroglyph recording and some high-tech stuff. So stay tuned for that on the next episode. Thanks a lot. That's it for another episode of the Archaeotech Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/Archaeotech. If you like the show and want to comment, please do. You can leave comments about this or any other episode on the website or on the iTunes page for this episode. You can also email us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com or use the contact form on the podcast webpage. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website or tweet your questions with the hashtag Archaeotech or tag @ArchPodNet in your tweet. Please share the link to this show wherever you saw it. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on iTunes or on Stitcher Radio. You can also type the name of the podcast into your favorite podcasting app and subscribe that way. Don't forget to go over to iTunes and leave a review of the show. It helps us get noticed so more people can find our podcast and benefit from the content. Also, send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. This show is produced by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.